The first thing anyone heard was the slap. Not a scream, not an alarm. Just the sharp, humiliating crack of skin against skin, echoing through the private terminal like a gunshot. Conversations died mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Somewhere, a rolling suitcase tipped over and spilled quietly onto the marble floor, unnoticed. Step away from the aircraft. Now. The voice belonged to a man in a tailored navy blazer, silver hair clipped close, posture rigid with authority. His hand was still raised. In front of him stood a woman who had not moved, had not raised her voice, had not even blinked when his palm struck her forearm to knock her phone to the ground. The phone skidded across the polished floor, vibrating weakly before going still. Her name was Eleanor Brooks. She was 58 years old. And at that moment, half the terminal had already decided exactly who she was. The camera would have caught it from a low angle. Eleanor, standing alone under the harsh white lights, rainwater darkening the hem of her tan trench coat, grey curls escaping a loose knot at the nape of her neck. No makeup. Sensible shoes. A canvas tote bag pressed against her side like a shield. Her breathing steady. Her face unreadable. To the man who hit her, she looked like a problem. "You don't get to wander in here," he snapped, chest heaving, eyes darting toward the glass doors as if an audience might make him right. "This is a restricted facility. Private aviation. You were told to wait outside." Eleanor slowly lowered her gaze to her arm. The skin was already flushing red where his fingers had struck. She touched it once, gently, as if confirming it was real. Then she looked back up at him. "I wasn't wondering," she said. Her voice was calm, low, almost conversational. "I was invited." A few feet away, a younger woman in a signature aviation vest shifted her weight, hands clenched tight around a clipboard. Her name badge read, Amanda. Early 30s, newly divorced, already exhausted. She had watched the whole thing unfold and said nothing. The silence tasted metallic in her mouth. The man scoffed. "Invited," he repeated, like the word offended him. "By who?" Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced past him, toward the aircraft parked just beyond the glass. A Gulf Stream, white and immaculate, its nose angled slightly into the wind. Its engines were quiet, but the air around it felt charged, like a held breath. "I'm boarding that flight," Eleanor said. That did it. Laughter broke out, short and sharp. Not from the crowd. From him. "You?" He looked her up and down now, openly, unapologetically. The tote bag, the scuffed shoes, the absence of an entourage. "Ma'am, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this jet is chartered. High-profile clients, people who value security." His eyes flicked to her hair, her coat, the absence of jewelry. He didn't say the word, but it hung between them anyway. "Belong." Amanda swallowed hard. She took a half step forward, then stopped. Her supervisor was watching from the other side of the terminal, arms crossed, already annoyed. "Don't get involved." That was the rule. Eleanor felt the eyes on her now, judgment layering over curiosity, pity, suspicion. She felt it the way you feel pressure change in your ears. "I have a boarding authorization," Eleanor said. "You can verify it." "Not how this works," the man snapped. "You don't show up unannounced and start pointing at planes. You wait. You check in. You don't cross security lines because you feel entitled." Entitled. The word landed heavier than the slap. Somewhere behind them, an older couple whispered. A man in a cashmere coat shook his head slowly, already irritated by the delay. Time was money, and she was wasting it. Eleanor bent down and picked up her phone. The screen was cracked now, a thin spider web spreading from one corner. She brushed it off with her sleeve. Her hands did not shake. "I crossed the line because your gate agent waved me through," she said, nodding once toward Amanda. "I told her my name." She checked the list. Amanda flinched. All eyes snapped to her. I did," she said, her voice barely audible. It cleared. The man turned on her, face hard. "You didn't check carefully enough. I checked twice," Amanda said. Her cheeks burned. "The system accepted it. That doesn't mean anything," he shot back. "The system glitches. That's why we use judgment." Judgment. Eleanor watched the word settle into Amanda's shoulders, watched her shrink under it. Something old stirred in Eleanor's chest. Not anger, recognition. "Who are you?" the man demanded again, stepping closer. He smelled like cologne and coffee and impatience. "Because whoever you think you are, you don't belong in this terminal without clearance." For a moment, Eleanor considered answering. She considered giving him her full name, spelled carefully. Considered listing credentials, boards, committees, the kind of words that made men like him straighten their spines without knowing why. She didn't. Instead, she met his eyes. "You shouldn't have touched me," she said. The air shifted. Subtle. Electric. He stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You shouldn't have touched me," she repeated, softer this time. "Not a threat. A statement. That was a mistake." He laughed again, but it came out thinner. "You're lucky I don't call airport police right now." "Go ahead," Eleanor said. Silence spread, slow and heavy. Amanda's fingers tightened around the clipboard. She felt suddenly dizzy. This was spiraling. She glanced toward security, then back at Eleanor. There was something unsettling about the woman's stillness. People who were afraid usually filled the air with noise. Eleanor did not. The man hesitated. Just a fraction. Long enough to notice that Eleanor was not pleading, not posturing, not performing. "You'll need to leave," he said, more controlled now. "Before this becomes a bigger issue." Eleanor looked past him again, through the glass, toward the jet. Rain streaked down its windows like veins. "It's already a bigger issue," she said. "You just don't know it yet." A beat. Then, from somewhere deeper in the terminal, a voice cut through. "Hold up. What's going on here?" A second man approached, mid-40s, earpiece coiled tight, eyes sharp. "Corporate security." He took in the scene quickly. The cracked phone, the red mark on Eleanor's arm, the man standing too close. "What happened?" he asked. "She's trespassing," the first man said immediately, refusing to comply. The security officer turned to Eleanor. "Ma'am?" Eleanor lifted her arm slightly, just enough for the mark to be visible under the lights. "I was struck," she said, "while attempting to board my flight." The word struck hung in the air, ugly and precise. The security officer's jaw tightened. "Sir," he said slowly, turning back to the man, "did you put your hands on her?" The man opened his mouth, closed it. Amanda felt her heart start to pound. Somewhere, far beyond the glass and the rain and the waiting aircraft, something had shifted. Not loudly, not yet, but the kind of shift that didn't reverse. Eleanor Brooks stood exactly where she was, tote bag at her side, eyes steady, breathing even. The plane behind her waited. No one answered the question right away. The security officer waited, eyes moving between Eleanor's arm and the man who still stood too close, his authority leaking out of him in small, angry breaths. Somewhere behind them, a printer chirped to life and spit out a boarding manifest that no one reached for. The terminal felt suddenly too quiet, like a courtroom just before a verdict. "She's exaggerating," the man said at last. His voice was smoother now, rehearsed. "I redirected her. She got in the way. That's all." Redirected. Eleanor almost smiled. The security officer did not. "Sir, I asked if you touched her." A beat. 2. His jaw flexed. I guided her arm. Amanda's stomach dropped. She stared at the floor, then forced herself to look up again. She could still hear the sound. Everyone could. Guided did not make that sound. The security officer exhaled through his nose. "Ma'am," he said to Eleanor, turning slightly toward her, "do you want medical attention?" "No," Eleanor said. "I want access." The man scoffed again, relief flashing across his face like a bad tell. "You hear that?" "She's fine. Can we move this along?" The officer held up a hand. "I'm not finished." He glanced at his tablet, tapped once, then twice. His brow furrowed. "You said you were boarding a flight." "Yes." "Name?" "Eleanor Brooks." The officer typed it in. The tablet lagged, spun, then populated with information he did not expect. His posture changed almost imperceptibly, shoulders back, voice careful. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "can you confirm the destination?" Eleanor met his eyes. "Santa Fe." The man laughed outright this time. "Santa Fe," he repeated. "You don't look like—" The officer cut him off with a look sharp enough to draw blood. "Sir." "Enough." Amanda felt her breath catch. Something was happening. She could feel it in the way the officer's fingers hovered over the screen, the way his jaw set. He turned the tablet slightly, shielding it from view, and took a step closer to Eleanor. "Sir Brooks," he said quietly, "this aircraft is listed under a blind charter." Eleanor nodded. "That's correct." Blind charter. The words slid through the terminal like ice water. The older couple stopped whispering. The man in the cashmere coat straightened. Blind charters were rare, deliberate, used when passengers did not want their identities disclosed, even internally. The man's smile faltered. "What does that mean?" he demanded. "It means," the officer said, not looking at him, "that the manifest is sealed and clearance is verified externally." He turned the tablet toward Eleanor. "I need you to confirm one more thing." Eleanor reached into her tote bag. Slowly, deliberately. Every eye tracked the movement. She pulled out a folded document, creased soft from use, and handed it to him. Amanda leaned forward without realizing it. The officer read. His eyes flicked up once, then back down. When he finished, he did not hand it back right away. "Sir," he said, turning now to the man, "what is your role here?" "I'm overseeing departures," the man snapped, "and I don't appreciate being questioned in front of—" "What is your role?" the officer repeated. A pause. "The wrong kind." "I manage client experience," the man said finally. "Then you don't have authority to physically redirect anyone," the officer said, "especially not someone cleared for a blind charter." The man's face flushed. "You're taking her side because she waved a piece of paper." "No," the officer said. "I'm taking policy's side." Amanda felt something unclench in her chest. It was small, but it mattered. The officer handed the document back to Eleanor. "Ms. Brooks, I'm going to escort you to the aircraft." Eleanor inclined her head slightly. "Thank you." The man stepped forward, panic leaking into his voice now. "This is ridiculous. You're going to delay an entire operation for her." The officer turned. His tone was cold. "You already did." They moved. Eleanor walked beside the officer, her pace unhurried. The terminal parted around them like a current. No one spoke. Even the man in the cashmere coat watched her pass, his irritation replaced by something closer to unease. Amanda hesitated. Then she stepped out from behind the desk. "Miss Brooks," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I'm sorry." Eleanor stopped, just long enough to look at her. "Really look? For what?" Eleanor asked. "For not saying something sooner," Amanda said. Her cheeks were wet now. She hadn't noticed when the tears came. "I should have." Eleanor studied her face, the strain, the fear that still clung like smoke. "You will," she said. "Next time." Amanda nodded, breath hitching. It felt like a promise. They reached the glass doors. Rain hammered against them, steady and relentless. Beyond, the Gulf Stream waited, lights glowing soft against the grey. The officer keyed in a code. The doors slid open. Cold air rushed in. As Eleanor stepped forward, the man's voice cracked behind them. "This isn't over." Eleanor did not turn around. "Oh," she said, voice carrying just enough to reach him. "It is." The walk across the tarmac felt longer than it was. The rain soaked through Eleanor's coat, darkened her sleeves, plastered curls to her temples. She didn't wipe them away. She let the cold sharpen her focus. At the foot of the stairs, the officer stopped. He glanced up at the aircraft, then back at her. "Ms. Brooks," he said, choosing his words carefully. "There's something else." "Yes." "The crew hasn't been briefed," he said. "They won't recognize you." Eleanor looked up at the plane. Its windows reflected nothing back. "That's the point." The officer hesitated. "Do you want me to stay?" "No," Eleanor said. "But I'd like you to file the incident." He nodded. "Already started." "Good." She climbed the stairs alone. Inside, the cabin glowed warm and gold. Leather seats, soft lighting, the faint hum of systems waking. A woman in her 40s stood near the galley, frozen mid-motion, a tray trembling slightly in her hands. "Oh," the woman said. Hello." Eleanor took in the name badge. Rachel. Senior flight attendant. Tired eyes. Polished smile that had learned how to hide things. "Good afternoon," Eleanor said. Rachel's eyes flicked to Eleanor's wet coat, her bare hands, the absence of anyone following her. Something tightened behind her smile. "May I see your identification?" Eleanor handed over nothing. Rachel waited. The silence stretched. "I'm boarding," Eleanor said. Rachel swallowed. "Of course. It's just protocol." Eleanor stepped past her, moving deeper into the cabin. She set her tote bag down gently on the seat nearest the window. Not the largest, not the smallest, just one. Rachel followed, flustered now. "Ma'am, I need to—" "I was struck in your terminal," Eleanor said, turning at last. "By a member of your ground staff." Rachel froze. The tray rattled. I'm so sorry. Are you injured?" "No," Eleanor said. "But I am observant." Rachel nodded quickly. "Too quickly. I'll inform the captain." Eleanor watched her retreat, watched the tension in her shoulders, the way she smoothed her uniform like armor. She sat down slowly, feeling the seat cradle her weight. Outside, rain streaked down the windows. Inside, the plane felt sealed off from the world. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. She let herself feel the ache in her arm, the cold in her bones, the familiar weight of being underestimated. Then she opened them again. The engines were starting. The tempo was rising. And somewhere, far beyond this cabin, the consequences were already in motion. The cabin door sealed with a muted hiss that sounded final in a way Eleanor had learned to respect. Rachel moved through the aisle with a stiffness that hadn't been there moments earlier, her professionalism now edged with something brittle. She stopped at the cockpit door, knocked once, then disappeared inside. Eleanor watched the door close behind her, the small red light blinking on, and felt the aircraft subtly change character. Less welcoming, more watchful. Across the aisle, a man in his late 60s adjusted his reading glasses and pretended very hard not to stare. He wore a wool blazer despite the heat, hands folded over a leather folio like a habit. He glanced at Eleanor, then away, then back again, his curiosity warring with something older and less generous. At the rear of the cabin, another passenger shifted. Younger, 40s maybe. Expensive sneakers that had never touched real dirt. He spoke softly into his phone, voice tight. "No, I'm already on." "Yeah. There's a situation. I'll explain later." He ended the call and looked straight at Eleanor without apology, as if daring her to notice. She did. She always did. The engines spooled higher. A low vibration traveled through the floor, up the legs of the seat, into her bones. Eleanor breathed with it, slow and even, grounding herself. She had learned long ago that panic was contagious, but so was control. The cockpit door opened again. Rachel stepped out, followed by the captain. He was younger than Eleanor expected. Mid-40s, clean cut. Athletic in the way men who spent their lives passing physicals tended to be. His uniform fit perfectly, sleeves pressed sharp. His expression did not. "Ma'am," he said, stopping a few steps from Eleanor's seat. His voice carried. The cabin listened. "I'm Captain Harris." Eleanor looked up at him. She did not stand. She did not smile. "Good afternoon." Rachel hovered just behind his shoulder, eyes flicking between them. "There's been a report," the captain said, choosing his words like tools, "about an incident in the terminal." "Yes," Eleanor said. "There has." Captain Harris nodded once. "I need to clarify a few things before we proceed." "Proceed." Eleanor felt the weight of the word. "Go on. Are you traveling alone?" "Yes." "Are you aware this is a sealed charter?" "Yes." He paused. "Then you understand why we're being cautious." Eleanor studied his face. She saw the conflict there. Training versus instinct. Procedure versus something less comfortable. "Caution is appropriate," she said. "Assumptions are not." A murmur rippled through the cabin. The man with the folio cleared his throat loudly, then looked at the floor. The younger passenger leaned back, arms crossed, a faint smirk playing at his mouth. He enjoyed this. Eleanor could feel it. Captain Harris held her gaze. "Did you authorize anyone to accompany you?" "No." "Did you authorize any changes to the manifest?" "No." Another pause. The engines continued their steady climb in pitch. Time was tightening. Rachel stepped forward. "Captain, we're almost at pushback." "I know," he said, not taking his eyes off Eleanor. She tilted her head slightly. "If you're implying I'm an unauthorized presence on my own flight, you should say so plainly." The words landed with a soft thud. Unauthorized presence. The younger passenger's smirk vanished. Rachel's eyes widened. Captain Harris inhaled. "That's not what I'm implying." "Then what are you implying?" Eleanor asked. Silence stretched. The cabin felt smaller now, the air heavier. The captain's jaw worked. "I'm implying that ground reported you as distressed." Eleanor almost laughed. "Almost." "Distressed," she repeated. "Because I was struck." "That's not how it was framed," he said carefully. "Of course not," Eleanor said. "It rarely is." Rachel shifted, discomfort etched deep now. "Captain, I saw the mark. She wasn't—" "I'm handling it," Harris snapped, then softened his tone. "Thank you, Rachel." Eleanor watched the exchange closely. She filed it away. People revealed themselves under pressure, often without realizing it. "Captain," she said, "you have two options. You can document what happened and proceed with the flight. Or you can escalate based on incomplete information and delay a sealed charter." The older man across the aisle looked up sharply now. Delay was a language he understood. The younger passenger leaned forward. "Is there a problem with the flight?" he asked loudly. "Because I have commitments." Eleanor turned her head slowly toward him. Their eyes met. He held her gaze, unblinking, testing. Captain Harris exhaled. "Sir, please remain seated." Eleanor did not break eye contact with the younger man. She noted the faint tremor in his knee, the way his fingers tapped once against his armrest. Not fear. Anticipation. "Captain," she said, turning back, "I'm not here to make this difficult." His laugh was short and humorless. "That's not how it feels, not how it—" "Then perhaps," Eleanor said gently, "you should ask yourself why." The words settled into him. She could see it. A crack, small, but real. Rachel spoke again, quietly. "Captain, Tower is asking." He closed his eyes for a beat, then opened them. "We're pushing back." A collective breath released through the cabin. The engines roared louder as the plane began to move, the world outside sliding sideways. Captain Harris straightened. "Ms. Brooks," he said, voice formal now, "we'll continue this conversation once we're airborne." Eleanor nodded. "I'll be here." He turned to leave, then hesitated. "For the record," he said, not looking at her, "no one should have put their hands on you." It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing. He disappeared into the cockpit. The door sealed again. The plane taxied. The runway lights stretched ahead like a promise and a warning. As they accelerated, Eleanor felt the familiar press into her chest, the moment where gravity made its argument, and you either trusted the machine or you didn't. She trusted it. They lifted. The city dropped away. Clouds swallowed the windows, grey and unremarkable. Once the seatbelt sign chimed off, the cabin exhaled. Rachel moved quickly now, offering water, avoiding Eleanor's eyes. The older man accepted a glass with trembling fingers. The younger passenger did not. Instead, he stood. "Ma'am," he said, stepping into the aisle, blocking Rachel's path. "May I?" Rachel froze. "Sir, please sit down." "It's fine," Eleanor said. "Let him speak." The younger man smiled thinly. "I was wondering," he said, voice smooth, practiced, "if you always cause this much trouble when you travel." The cabin went still again. Eleanor felt the attention shift, sharpen. "I don't cause trouble," she said. "I reveal it." He chuckled. "That's a nice line." "It's not a line," Eleanor said. "It's an observation." He leaned closer. She smelled citrus and something synthetic. "You embarrassed a lot of people on the ground," he said softly. "Some of them don't like that." Eleanor studied his face. She saw calculation there. Opportunism. The glint of someone who mistook proximity for power. "I wasn't thinking about them," she said. "That's the problem," he replied. "You should." "Why?" Eleanor asked. "Because they have reach." Eleanor smiled then. "Not wide, not kind. So do I." The smile faltered. "Just a fraction." Rachel cleared her throat. "Sir, please return to your seat." He held Eleanor's gaze another second, then stepped back, hands raised in mock surrender. "Just trying to be friendly." As he sat, Eleanor felt the plane level off. Cruising altitude, the calm before whatever came next. She reached into her tote bag and finally took out what she had not shown anyone yet. A slim folder, unmarked. She opened it just enough to see the top page. The names were already there. The incident had simply accelerated the timeline. Outside, the clouds thinned. Sunlight broke through, harsh and unforgiving. Eleanor closed the folder and rested her hand on it, feeling the weight of what was coming. The flight had begun, and no one on board understood yet how far it was going to go. The turbulence hit without warning, a sharp drop that snapped the cabin out of its uneasy calm and sent a ripple of startled breaths through the seats. Rachel steadied herself against the galley counter, fingers white on the edge, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a little chop," she said, too quickly. "Please remain seated." Eleanor barely shifted. Her gaze stayed on the window, on the thin ribbon of horizon where blue met white, where control was an illusion pilots maintained with math and discipline. The jolt had not startled her. It had clarified something. In the cockpit, Captain Harris swore under his breath. The warning tone chimed again, softer this time, insistent. The first officer, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair pulled tight and eyes that missed nothing, glanced at her instruments. "That wasn't forecast," she said. "We're getting interference." Harris frowned. "From what?" She tapped the screen. "I'm not sure yet." Back in the cabin, the older man with the folio clutched his armrest, knuckles pale. The younger passenger leaned forward again, eyes bright now, energized by instability. He loved this part. Eleanor could feel it. Rachel moved down the aisle, checking belts, murmuring reassurances. When she reached Eleanor, she hesitated. "Miss Brooks," she said quietly. "Can I get you anything?" "Information," Eleanor said. "But I doubt you're allowed to give it." Rachel's lips parted, then pressed together. She nodded once, barely perceptible, and moved on. Another shudder passed through the plane. Not violent, purposeful, as if something external had brushed against them and then lingered. The cabin lights flickered. That got everyone's attention. "Captain," Rachel said into the intercom, her voice tight. "We have passengers asking." "I know," Harris cut in. "Stand by." The younger passenger stood again. "For God's sake," Rachel snapped, losing patience. "Sit down." He ignored her, eyes fixed on Eleanor. "Funny timing," he said, right when things were getting interesting. Eleanor did not look at him. She looked instead at the small screen embedded in the seat back ahead of her. It had gone dark. The engines held steady, but something in the vibration had changed, less confident, more strained. The older man cleared his throat. "Captain," he called out, voice quavering but loud, "I'd like to know what's happening." Harris's voice came over the speakers, controlled, professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a minor systems anomaly. There is no cause for alarm. Minor systems anomaly." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. She had heard those words in operating rooms, too, right before things became very real. The younger passenger laughed softly. "That's rich." Rachel turned on him. "Sir, this is not the time." "It never is," he said. "Until it is." Eleanor finally looked at him then. Really looked. She saw the way his confidence hinged on chaos, how he thrived when rules bent. She recognized the type. She had built safeguards against men like him for decades. "You seem unusually comfortable," she said. He shrugged. "I understand risk." "No," Eleanor said. "You exploit it." The turbulence intensified, a series of sharp jolts that rattled overhead bins and sent a glass shattering somewhere near the rear. A woman gasped. Someone prayed aloud. In the cockpit, the first officer's voice sharpened. "Captain, we're losing signal from the auxiliary bus." Harris's hand tightened on the controls. "Isolate it. I'm trying. It's not responding." A warning light blinked amber, then red. Harris felt a cold bloom in his chest. "Run the checklist." "We don't have a checklist for this configuration," she said. "This is external." External. Rachel braced herself against a seat as the plane dipped again. She caught Eleanor's eye, fear naked now. Eleanor unbuckled her seatbelt. Rachel stared. "Ms. Brooks, you need to stay seated." "I need to speak to the captain," Eleanor said. "That's not possible right now." "It is," Eleanor said, already moving. The younger passenger laughed again, delighted. "Oh, this I want to see." Rachel stepped into Eleanor's path. "Please." Eleanor stopped. She placed a hand on the seat back, steadying herself as the plane lurched. "Rachel," she said, gently but firmly, "listen to me. The interference you're experiencing isn't random." Rachel's breath caught. "How would you know that?" "Because," Eleanor said, lowering her voice, "this isn't the first time." Another jolt. Harder. In the cockpit, the first officer looked up sharply. "Captain, we've got a data spike. Something's pinging our systems." "From where?" She traced it, her face drained of color. "From inside the cabin." Silence slammed into the cockpit. "What?" Harris demanded. "It's localized," she said, "near the midsection." Harris's mind raced. Devices, interference, intent. He keyed the intercom. "Rachel." Her voice came back, breathless. "Yes, Captain. Is anyone using unauthorized equipment?" Rachel's eyes swept the cabin. Eleanor stood in the aisle, calm amid the chaos. The younger passenger had gone very still. "I don't know," Rachel said. "Find out," Harris snapped. Eleanor stepped forward again. This time, Rachel did not stop her. "Captain Harris," Eleanor said into the intercom handset. Rachel thrust toward her. "This situation will escalate if you don't secure the source." Harris stiffened. "Who is this?" "This is the person you should have listened to earlier," Eleanor said. "There is a device on this plane interfering with your systems." The younger passenger's smile vanished. "That's absurd," he said too quickly. "She's making things up." The older man looked between them, eyes wide. "Is that true?" Eleanor turned toward the younger passenger. "Stand up," she said. He didn't move. "Stand up," she repeated, louder now, voice cutting through the cabin like a blade. Rachel looked to him. "Sir, please comply." He laughed, brittle. "You don't have authority over me." Eleanor stepped closer. The plane lurched again, throwing him off balance. He grabbed a seat, anger flaring. "You don't know who you're dealing with," he hissed. "I do," Eleanor said. "And so will they." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out the slim folder. She opened it fully now, pages fluttering in the turbulence. Names. dates, diagrams. This flight was never about Santa Fe, Eleanor said, her voice carrying. It was about exposure. The younger passenger lunged. Rachel screamed. The plane shuddered violently as the first officer shouted, "Captain, we're losing lateral control." Harris fought the controls, heart hammering. What the hell is happening back there? Eleanor met the younger passenger head-on, slamming the folder into his chest and knocking him back into his seat. Something clattered to the floor, skidding under the row. A small device, black, blinking. The older man gasped. "What is that?" Eleanor kicked it away from her foot. "That," she said, breathing hard now, "is why we're all in danger." Rachel stared at the device, then at the younger passenger, who was scrambling, panic naked on his face. "Sir," Rachel said, voice shaking, "what did you bring on this plane?" He didn't answer. Eleanor picked up the device carefully, fingers steady despite the chaos. "Captain," she said into the intercom, "secure the cabin. You have an active interference unit on board." Harris's blood ran cold. "How do you know that?" "Because," Eleanor said, eyes locked on the man she had just disarmed. "This isn't a random flight. And he isn't a random passenger." The plane bucked again, then steadied slightly as the device powered down in Eleanor's hand. In the cockpit, the warning lights dimmed. The first officer exhaled sharply. Systems stabilizing. Harris closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. "Turn us around," he said. "We're diverting." Back in the cabin, Eleanor stood amid the wreckage of composure and denial, the device heavy in her palm. "This," she said quietly, "to no one and everyone, is where the story actually begins." No one argued. The plane banked left, slow and deliberate, the horizon tilting as if the sky itself were reconsidering its position. Rachel sank into the jump seat, chest rising too fast, eyes locked on Eleanor's hand where the device lay inert. The older man crossed himself, whispering something Eleanor couldn't hear. A woman near the back sobbed into her sleeve. The younger passenger, now very quiet, sat rigid, jaw clenched, eyes darting like a cornered animal calculating exits that no longer existed. Captain Harris's voice came through the cabin, steadier now, sharpened by purpose. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are diverting due to a security matter. Please remain seated. Federal authorities have been notified." "Federal?" The word hit like gravity. The younger passenger's composure cracked. "You can't do this," he said, standing despite Rachel's shout. "This is a misunderstanding." Eleanor turned toward him, slowly. "Sit down." Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. He hesitated. The plane shuddered lightly as it adjusted altitude. The air pressed back. He sat. Eleanor held the device between thumb and forefinger, careful not to touch the blinking seam along its edge. It was heavier than it looked, warm from use. She placed it on the nearest seat, away from everyone, and covered it with her tote bag. "Rachel," she said. "Do you have restraints?" Rachel blinked. "For turbulence?" "Bring them," Eleanor said. The younger passenger laughed weakly. "You think you can just—" Rachel returned with 2 belts, hands shaking. Eleanor took them and looked at the man. "Hands," Eleanor said. He didn't move. Eleanor leaned closer. If you make me ask again, this will be worse. Something in her eyes decided it for him. He raised his hands. Eleanor moved quickly, efficiently, securing his wrists to the armrests. She tightened the belt once more than necessary. He winced. "This is unlawful," he spat. "No," Eleanor said. "This is containment." In the cockpit, the first officer's voice cut through the intercom, tight but controlled. "Captain, FAA wants details. Now." Harris keyed the mic. "Tell them we have a confirmed interference device and a detained individual. Advise DHS." DHS. Another weight added. Eleanor returned to her seat and finally sat. Her pulse was steady. It surprised her how calm she felt. Not detached. Focused. The kind of focus that came after years of deciding which risks were acceptable and which were not. The older man leaned across the aisle, voice trembling. "Ma'am, who are you?" Eleanor looked at him. She saw fear there, yes, but also relief. Someone was in control. "I'm someone who plans for contingencies," she said. The younger passenger scoffed. "You're enjoying this." Eleanor did not look at him. "You brought a weapon onto an aircraft." "It's not a weapon," he snapped. "It's a jammer." "It disrupted flight systems," Eleanor said. "On purpose." Rachel swallowed. "Why?" she asked him, voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you do that?" He laughed, sharp and humorless. "Because no one pays attention until things break." The plane leveled off. The turbulence eased, replaced by a tense, humming quiet. Outside the window, land slid into view, patchworked and distant. Harris's voice returned. "Ms. Brooks," he said, careful now. "We need to understand how you identified the device." Eleanor picked up the intercom handset. "Because this isn't the first time someone tried to make a point at altitude." Silence on the line. "Years ago," she continued, "a regional flight lost control for 12 seconds. 12. Long enough to kill confidence and short enough to escape headlines. The investigation blamed software. It wasn't. It was interference. Deliberate. Tested." The first officer breathed out slowly. "Jesus." "I helped write the mitigation protocols," Eleanor said. "I recognized the pattern." Harris's voice dropped. "Then you knew this was a risk?" "Yes." "And you boarded anyway?" "Yes." "Why?" Eleanor paused. She looked down the aisle at the restrained man, at the passengers clinging to normalcy, at Rachel's pale face. She chose the truth that mattered. "Because sometimes," she said, "you don't stop a threat by avoiding it. You stop it by exposing it where it can't hide." The younger passenger barked a laugh. "You think this ends with me?" Eleanor met his eyes. "I know it doesn't." He leaned back as far as the restraints allowed, breathing hard now. "You have no idea who you've angered." "I do," Eleanor said. "I just don't fear them." The cabin door to the cockpit opened. Harris stepped out, face set. He looked older now. Not weaker. Wiser. "Ms. Brooks," he said, "we'll be on the ground in 20 minutes. Authorities will take custody. Eleanor nodded. I'll remain available. Harris hesitated. For what it's worth, you were right. Eleanor did not respond. Validation was not what she had come for. The descent began. The lights dimmed. The air thickened as pressure shifted. Somewhere, a child cried. Someone held hands. Someone prayed again, louder this time. Rachel knelt beside Eleanor's seat. I froze earlier, she said. On the ground. I keep thinking about it. Eleanor looked at her. Freezing is information, she said. It tells you what matters. Rachel swallowed. What if I freeze again? Then you'll remember this, Eleanor said. And you won't? The wheels hit the runway with a firm, reassuring thud. Applause broke out, scattered and shaky. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, feeling the deceleration, the return to Earth. The plane rolled to a stop. Sirens wailed outside. Red and blue light flickered across the cabin walls like a warning heartbeat. The door opened. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clean. Boots climbed the stairs. Voices layered over each other. Authority arrived with paperwork and practiced calm. An agent stepped inside, scanning the cabin. Who secured the device? Eleanor raised her hand. The agent's eyes met hers. Recognition flickered. Miss Brooks, he said quietly. She inclined her head. He nodded once, deeply. We'll take it from here. They removed the restrained man. He twisted in his seat, shouting now, words tumbling into each other. You think you won, he screamed at Eleanor as they dragged him past. This doesn't end. Eleanor watched him go, expression unreadable. No, she said softly. It begins. The cabin emptied slowly after that. Statements, blankets, water. Hands that shook less with each passing minute. Rachel hugged Eleanor once, abruptly, then apologized. Eleanor held her until the shaking stopped. At last, Eleanor stood alone in the doorway, the night stretching warm and cold beyond the lights. She breathed it in. Somewhere, phones rang. Somewhere, names were being connected, lines drawn. The machine of consequence was already turning. Eleanor Brooks stepped down onto the tarmac, steady and unafraid, carrying nothing but a tote bag and the weight of what she had set in motion. The hangar smelled like jet fuel and wet concrete, a sharp metallic scent that clung to the back of Eleanor's throat as she stepped inside. Floodlights cast long, distorted shadows across the floor. Federal agents moved with efficient quiet, voices low, shoes echoing in clipped rhythms. The Gulf Stream sat behind her now, inert and obedient, its engines cooling, its secrets already stripped bare. Eleanor stood near the edge of the activity, coat folded over her arm, tote bag at her feet. She watched, always watched. This was the part most people misunderstood. They thought the danger ended when the threat was removed. In her experience, this was when it actually began. An agent approached her, tall, late 40s, eyes that had seen too much and trusted very little. His jacket read Homeland Security, but the way others deferred to him suggested more. Ms. Brooks, he said. I'm Agent Daniel Mercer. She shook his hand. His grip was firm but careful, like he understood what boundaries were for. We're running preliminary diagnostics on the aircraft, Mercer continued. The device you recovered is sophisticated. Yes, Eleanor said. It would have to be. Mercer studied her face. You anticipated this? I prepared for it, she corrected. He gestured toward a folding table set up near the hangar wall. Evidence bags, laptops, a portable scanner humming softly. We're going to need a statement. Of course, Eleanor said. But before that, you should know something. Mercer raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. The man you took off that plane is not the architect, Eleanor said. He's an intermediary. Mercer didn't react. That worried her more than surprise would have. We thought as much, he said. He's been flagged before, never with enough to hold. Because he's careful, Eleanor said. Or he was. Mercer glanced toward the far end of the hangar, where the detained man sat cuffed to a chair, head down, flanked by 2 agents. He's talking now. Eleanor nodded. He will. He always does when the risk shifts. Mercer leaned back against a steel beam. You didn't answer my earlier question. I don't recall you asking one. Why you were on that flight, Mercer said. With that knowledge. Eleanor looked past him, through the open hangar doors, out into the night. The runway lights blinked steadily, indifferent, because someone needed to be. Mercer watched her closely. That's not an answer most people give. I'm not most people. A younger agent approached, tablet in hand. Sir, she said to Mercer, we traced the device. It's piggybacking off a network that's been dark for years. Mercer's jaw tightened. Which network? The agent hesitated. One tied to a private contractor out of Virginia. Defense adjacent. Eleanor felt something cold settle in her chest. Not fear. Recognition. Mercer noticed. You know that contractor. Yes, Eleanor said. I helped shut them down. The hangar seemed to lean in, listening. Mercer exhaled slowly. That was before my time. Before a lot of people's time, Eleanor said. They rebranded, split, hid inside consultancies and shell firms. And you tracked them, Mercer said. I tried to, Eleanor said. But access is everything. That flight was access. Mercer studied her for a long moment. You put civilians at risk. Eleanor met his gaze without flinching. So did they. I reduced the variables. By being on board. By being visible, Eleanor said. There's a difference. A raised voice cut through the hangar. The detained man was shouting now, words spilling out, brittle and desperate. You don't understand what you're dealing with, he yelled. They'll burn you for this. Mercer turned toward him. That's enough. The man laughed, high and cracked. Ask her, he said, jerking his chin toward Eleanor. She knows. Mercer looked back at Eleanor. Do you? Eleanor nodded once. I do. The man sagged in his chair, suddenly exhausted. Then you know this doesn't end with arrests. No, Eleanor said. It ends with exposure. Mercer straightened. Ms. Brooks, with respect, this is a federal matter. Eleanor smiled faintly. With respect, Agent Mercer, it always was. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Mercer broke it first. "We're diverting the passengers," he said. "Commercial arrangements. The aircraft will be grounded pending full inspection. Understood." "And you?" Mercer asked. "I'll cooperate," Eleanor said. "Fully." He nodded. "Good." As Mercer walked away, Rachel appeared at Eleanor's side, wrapped in a borrowed jacket, eyes rimmed red but alert. "They're putting us up nearby," she said. "I just wanted to check on you." "I'm fine," Eleanor said. Rachel hesitated. "They asked me a lot of questions." "They should have." "I told them everything," Rachel said quickly. "Even the parts that made me look bad." Eleanor placed a hand on her shoulder. "Truth tends to do that before it does anything else." Rachel let out a shaky breath. "I don't think I can go back to flying after this." Eleanor considered her. "You might not want to," she said. "But don't decide tonight." Rachel nodded, tears spilling again. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not treating me like I was invisible." Eleanor felt the weight of that land where it always did, deep and familiar. "You weren't." Rachel squeezed her hand once, then stepped away. The hangar began to empty. Equipment packed up. Agents rotated out. The night grew quieter, the kind of quiet that followed upheaval, not peace. Mercer returned, holding a thin folder. "One more thing," he said. "Your name triggered some alerts." Eleanor arched an eyebrow. "I imagine it would." "Some people are already calling," Mercer said. "Asking questions, high places." "Of course they are." He studied her again. "You're not worried?" "I am," Eleanor said. "But not about what they think." Mercer nodded slowly. "You should get some rest." "I will," Eleanor said. "Eventually." As Mercer turned away, Eleanor picked up her tote bag and walked toward the exit. The cold air hit her face, sharp and clean, grounding. She paused at the threshold, looking back once at the hangar, the plane, the agents, the man who had thought he could control the sky. She stepped out into the night. Above her, the stars were faint, washed out by light pollution, but they were there. Always were. Waiting. Eleanor Brooks walked toward the car that waited for her, already planning the next move, because this story was no longer about a flight or a device or a single man in cuffs. It was about systems, and systems once exposed did not forgive. The car ride into the city was quiet in the way that followed something irreversible. Streetlights slid across the windows in long amber bands. The driver did not ask questions. He had been instructed not to. Eleanor appreciated that. She sat in the back seat, coat folded neatly beside her, hands resting on her knees, mind moving faster than the vehicle ever could. Her phone vibrated once. Then again. She ignored it. By the time they reached the hotel, the news had already begun to leak. Not headlines yet. Ripples, internal alerts, secure messages passed between people who rarely wrote anything down. The kind of movement you felt before the ground shifted. In the lobby, a television murmured above the bar. Stock footage of an airport runway looped silently while a ticker crawled beneath it. An aviation incident under investigation. No names, no details. Yet. Eleanor checked in under her own name. No alias. No theatrics. The clerk glanced at the screen, then at her, then back again. Recognition flickered, unformed but present. Eleanor took her key and thanked him. Upstairs, the room smelled like fresh linen and lemon polish. Clean, neutral, safe in the way places were when they pretended to be untouched by the world outside. Eleanor set her tote bag on the desk and finally sat. She exhaled. Only then did she pick up her phone. 37 missed calls, most from blocked numbers, some from familiar ones she had not spoken to in years, 2 from board members who did not usually call after hours. One message stood out, a single text. "We need to talk." Tonight. It was unsigned. It did not need to be. Eleanor deleted it. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window, looking down at the city. Cars moved like veins of light. People lived their lives unaware that something above them had almost gone very wrong. Her phone vibrated again. This time she answered. "Yes," she said. "Jesus, Eleanor," the voice on the other end said. Male, controlled, angry in the way men were when control slipped. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I do," Eleanor said. "Do you?" A pause. A breath drawn through teeth. "You went off script." "There was no script," Eleanor said. "That was the problem. You boarded a sealed charter knowing there was a live threat," he snapped. "You forced a federal diversion." "I neutralized a test run," Eleanor said. "You've been ignoring the data for years." "That wasn't your call." Eleanor's eyes hardened. "It became my call when you failed to make it." Silence. Then quieter. "You've made enemies." Eleanor smiled faintly. "I already had them." The man sighed. "They're asking questions." "They should," Eleanor said. "Answer them honestly. You think this ends well?" "I think it ends truthfully," Eleanor said. "That's more than you can say." She ended the call. For a long moment, she stood there, phone still in her hand, feeling the echo of what she had just set in motion. Not satisfaction, not fear. Responsibility. Heavy and familiar. Another knock came at the door. Eleanor checked the peephole. Rachel stood outside, hair still damp, eyes red but determined. Eleanor opened the door. "I couldn't sleep," Rachel said. "They said you were staying here." Eleanor stepped aside. "Come in." Rachel perched on the edge of the chair, twisting her fingers together. "They took my statement again," she said. "This time with lawyers." Eleanor nodded. "That will happen." "They asked about you," Rachel continued. "Who you were. Why you were on the flight." "And what did you say?" Rachel met her eyes. "That you were the only person who didn't panic." Eleanor absorbed that quietly. Rachel swallowed. "They also asked if I'd be willing to testify. If this goes further." "When?" Eleanor corrected gently. Rachel let out a breath. "I said yes." Eleanor's gaze softened. That wasn't an easy decision. "No," Rachel said. But it was the right one. Eleanor reached out and squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you." Rachel's eyes filled again, but she smiled this time. "They're putting me on administrative leave." "That's temporary," Eleanor said, "and survivable." Rachel nodded. "I wanted to thank you, not just for tonight, for reminding me I had a choice." Eleanor held her gaze. "You always did." After Rachel left, Eleanor sat at the desk and opened her laptop. The folder she had carried onto the plane was mirrored here, expanded now, layered with new data already flowing in. Messages pinged, secure channels lit up. The exposure was working. Names surfaced. Companies. Shells inside shells. The device had not been a one-off. It was a probe. A pressure test on aging infrastructure, on complacent oversight, on the assumption that no one would be brave or foolish enough to interrupt. They had underestimated her. She typed steadily, fingers precise, drafting a memo that would not be sent yet. Not until the timing was right. Power, she knew, was less about volume than sequence. Another knock, firmer this time. Eleanor opened the door to find Agent Mercer standing there, jacket off, tie loosened, exhaustion lining his face. "Sorry to bother you," he said, "but things are moving faster than we expected." Eleanor stepped back. "Come in." Mercer did not sit. "The man from the flight is cooperating." "Partially." "Of course he is. He named a facilitator," Mercer continued. "Someone higher up. Not public-facing." Eleanor nodded. "They never are." Mercer studied her. He also said something else. That tonight wasn't supposed to fail. Eleanor's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the desk. Then what was it supposed to do? Mercer hesitated. Create doubt. Shake confidence. Just enough. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steady. "Then we were right to stop it here." Mercer exhaled. "You're going to be pulled into this whether you like it or not." "I know." "And when that happens," Mercer said carefully, "people are going to ask who gave you the authority." Eleanor met his gaze. "I did." Mercer nodded slowly. "That's what I thought." He paused at the door. "For what it's worth, you saved lives tonight." Eleanor did not respond until he was gone. She returned to the window. Dawn was beginning to edge the horizon, faint and pale. A new day, carrying the weight of what had almost been lost. Somewhere, meetings were being called, statements drafted, denials rehearsed, and somewhere else, very quietly, the ground was preparing to give way. Eleanor Brooks stood alone in the half-light, already bracing for what came next, because the storm she had interrupted was still forming. And this time, it was coming for everything. Morning came without ceremony. No sunrise worth admiring, just a thin grey light leaking between buildings, flattening the city into something practical and unforgiving. Eleanor had not slept. She had changed clothes, brewed hotel coffee she did not drink, and read until the words blurred into patterns rather than meaning. At 6:42 in the morning, the first headline appeared. Aviation security breach under federal review after mid-air systems disruption. By 7:15, her phone rang again. This time, she answered. "Ms. Brooks," the woman on the line said, voice clipped, trained. "This is Deputy Counsel Harris from the Department of Transportation. We need to speak with you immediately." Eleanor glanced at the television, now aliff with panels of men in dark suits, speculating in absolutes they did not yet understand. "You already are," she said. A pause. Then, "This will require your full cooperation." "It already has it," Eleanor replied. "But not your framing." Another pause, longer this time. "We'll be sending a car." "They know where I am," Eleanor said. "I'm not hiding." The line went dead. By 8:30, the hotel lobby was no longer neutral territory. Two men, pretending to read newspapers, sat too straight. A woman by the elevator watched Eleanor with the focused curiosity of someone memorizing a face. Eleanor walked past them calmly, coat on, tote bag over her shoulder, spine straight. The car waiting outside was government-issued, but unmarked. Inside, the driver did not introduce himself. Eleanor did not ask. They drove to a building Eleanor had visited before, though never under circumstances like these. Concrete, glass, flags. The architecture of seriousness. Inside, she was led through corridors that smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paper. No windows, no clocks. She noted both. The room they brought her to was spare. Table, 3 chairs, a pitcher of water untouched. 2 people waited for her. One she recognized immediately. The other took longer. Agent Mercer stood near the wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. At the table sat a woman in her early 60s, hair silver, posture immaculate, eyes sharp enough to cut. "Eleanor Brooks," the woman said. Not a greeting, a confirmation. "I'm Margaret Klein." Eleanor felt the name land. Former oversight. Retired publicly. Not inactive privately. "I know who you are," Eleanor said. Margaret's mouth twitched. "Of course you do." They sat. Margaret folded her hands. "You disrupted an active operation." "I prevented a catastrophic failure," Eleanor said. "Those are not the same thing." Margaret leaned forward. "You were not authorized to conduct countermeasures. I was authorized to protect human life," Eleanor replied. "That authority does not expire." Mercer shifted slightly. Margaret raised a hand without looking at him. "You've always had a talent for reframing," Margaret said. "But this time, you exposed vulnerabilities we were not prepared to admit publicly." Eleanor met her gaze. "Prepared or willing?" Margaret held the stare. "There are consequences to forcing the truth into daylight." "Yes," Eleanor said. "That's why people avoid it." Margaret sighed. "You've triggered inquiries across 3 agencies. Markets are reacting. Contractors are calling senators." "Good," Eleanor said. "That's where pressure belongs." Margaret studied her, something like regret flickering briefly across her face. "You could have come to us." "I did," Eleanor said. "Years ago. You filed it under insufficient evidence." Margaret did not deny it. "What you did last night," Margaret said, voice lower now. will end careers. It should, Eleanor said. It almost ended lives. Silence settled. Heavy. Evaluative. Mercer cleared his throat. "We have confirmation," he said, "that the interference was a live fire test, not theoretical." Margaret closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, something had shifted. "Then we have a problem." "Yes," Eleanor said. "And it's not me." Margaret leaned back. "You understand that some people will try to make it you?" Eleanor's voice was steady. "They always do." Margaret smiled thinly. "You haven't changed." "I have," Eleanor said. "I just stopped apologizing for it." Margaret stood. The meeting was over, whether it had resolved anything or not. "We'll be in touch, I'm sure," Eleanor said. As Eleanor left the building, reporters gathered at a distance, microphones ready but restrained by barriers and handlers. No questions yet. That would come. Outside, the air felt heavier. Charged. Her phone buzzed, a message from a number she did not recognize. "They're moving assets. You forced their hand," Eleanor typed back. That was the point. She walked instead of taking the car, letting the city absorb her. She passed cafes opening for the morning rush, office workers clutching coffee and routine, people unaware of how close the sky above them had come to chaos. She felt a strange tenderness for them. This was who she had done it for, even if they would never know her name. At a crosswalk, she stopped, watched traffic surge and pause. Systems obeying rules because enough people still believed in them. Another message came in. This one from Mercer. "We intercepted a call. They're blaming you." Eleanor smiled faintly. She typed back. They always do when accountability shows up uninvited. Her phone rang almost immediately. "You're enjoying this," Mercer said, but there was no accusation in it. Just recognition. "No," Eleanor replied. "I'm enduring it." "Press conference at noon," Mercer said. "They're going to need a narrative." "Then they should choose one that survives daylight," Eleanor said. "And if they don't?" Eleanor paused at the curb, watching a bus pull away, leaving a wake of exhaust and noise. "Then I will." She ended the call and kept walking. By noon, the narrative was already fracturing. Leaks contradicted statements. Anonymous sources argued with each other on air. The device was no longer a rumor. Its existence confirmed by 3 agencies that could not agree on how it had been missed. Eleanor sat alone in a quiet room at a law firm that had not advertised itself in decades. Old wood, thick walls, a place built for consequences. Across the table sat 2 attorneys and 1 man Eleanor had not expected to see again, the younger passenger from the flight. He looked smaller now, not physically, psychologically. His confidence had collapsed inward, leaving something brittle and mean. "You think you won," he said, unable to meet her eyes. "You think this makes you powerful?" Eleanor regarded him evenly. "Power isn't the goal. Stability is." "You destabilized everything," he spat. "No," Eleanor said. "I exposed instability that already existed." He laughed, hollow. "They'll sacrifice you." "Maybe," Eleanor said, "but not before they sacrifice you." His face drained of color. Outside, the city buzzed. unaware that a quiet line had been crossed, that a precedent had been set, that someone had stood up inside the machine and refused to let it lie. Eleanor Brooks sat back in her chair, shoulders squared, gaze steady. The storm had reached the surface, and this time it could not be contained. The hearing room was colder than it needed to be, the kind of cold designed to keep people alert and uncomfortable at the same time. Eleanor sat at the long witness table, hands folded, posture relaxed but deliberate. Cameras lined the back wall now, their presence negotiated down to a compromise that still felt invasive. Red lights blinked on and off like restrained impatience. Across from her, a semicircle of officials shuffled papers they had already read twice. The chairwoman adjusted her microphone. "Ms. Brooks," she said, voice even. "You understand that you are under oath?" "Yes," Eleanor replied. "I always do." A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. The chairwoman ignored it. "Let's begin with the night of the incident. You boarded a sealed charter with prior knowledge of a potential interference threat. Why did you not notify federal authorities beforehand?" Eleanor did not rush the answer. She looked at the room. The flags. The seals. The men and women who had built careers on careful language. "Because the last time I did," she said. The warning was buried. A man 2 seats down leaned forward. "That's a serious allegation. It's a documented one," Eleanor said. "Submitted 6 years ago. Referred twice. Closed without action." The man stiffened. Papers rustled. Someone whispered. "You're suggesting institutional negligence," another voice said. "I'm stating a sequence of decisions," Eleanor replied. "Interpretation is yours." The chairwoman lifted a hand. "Ms. Brooks, do you believe you acted alone?" "No," Eleanor said. "I acted informed." "Informed by whom?" "By data," Eleanor said. "By patterns. By the absence of curiosity." A pause. The room felt smaller. "Let's talk about the device," the chairwoman said. "You identified it immediately." "Yes." "You neutralized it without authorization." "Yes." "Do you have formal training in electronic countermeasures?" "No," Eleanor said. "I have experience." The chairwoman frowned. "That is not the same thing." "It is when the alternative is inaction," Eleanor said. A murmur traveled through the observers' seats. One camera zoomed in slightly. A younger committee member cleared his throat. "Ms. Brooks, some would argue that your actions were reckless." Eleanor turned her head toward him. Slowly. "Some would argue that allowing untested interference on civilian aircraft is reckless." The man flushed. "Answer the question." "I did," Eleanor said. The chairwoman intervened. "We're not here to litigate tone." Eleanor inclined her head. "Then we should focus on outcomes." The chairwoman hesitated, then nodded. "Very well. The outcome was a diversion, a detained suspect, and the exposure of a covert testing operation. Do you believe the ends justify the means?" Eleanor looked down at her hands, then back up. "I believe lives justify intervention." Silence fell. Heavy. The kind that carried weight beyond the room. From the back, a voice rose. "Ms. Brooks." The chairwoman turned. "Yes?" An aide leaned in, whispered. The chairwoman's expression changed, tightened. She looked back at Eleanor. "We've just received confirmation that 2 additional devices matching the same signature were intercepted this morning, on separate routes." A low gasp rippled through the room. Eleanor felt it then. Not surprise. Relief. Controlled. Earned. "That was going to happen," Eleanor said quietly. The chairwoman stared at her. "You knew." "I suspected," Eleanor said. "That's why I acted publicly. Quiet warnings don't stop coordinated behavior. Exposure does." The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Cameras whirred. The chairwoman struck her gavel once, hard. "Order," she said. "Order." She leaned forward now, gaze locked on Eleanor. "You understand the implications of what you're saying?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "That's why I said it." The hearing recessed after that. Not because questions had been answered, but because they could no longer be contained in the room. Outside, the press surged. Eleanor was escorted through a side exit, agents forming a quiet barrier. Questions flew anyway, shouted and sharp. She did not answer them. Not yet. In a waiting area, Agent Mercer stood with his arms crossed, jaw set. "You just accelerated this by months." "Good," Eleanor said. "You made enemies in there. I already had them." Mercer exhaled. "You also made allies. That remains to be seen." Her phone buzzed. A message from a secure channel she had not accessed in years. "They're dismantling the network." Not quietly. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the room felt steadier. Later that afternoon, she stood alone on the steps outside the building. Sunlight cutting sharp lines across stone that had watched history repeat itself more times than anyone cared to admit. The microphones were back now. Fewer handlers, less restraint. An anchor stepped forward. "Ms. Brooks, do you believe the public is safe?" Eleanor took a breath. This time, she spoke. "I believe the public deserves honesty," she said. "Safety built on denial is temporary." Another voice. "Do you regret your actions?" "No," Eleanor said. "I regret the silence that made them necessary." "Are you afraid of retaliation?" Eleanor met the question head-on. Fear doesn't disappear because you avoid it. It disappears when you face what causes it. The questions kept coming. She answered only what mattered. By evening, the narrative had shifted. Not fully, but enough. Words like whistleblower and accountability replaced rogue and reckless. The balance was not settled, but it had moved. At home. Eleanor finally removed her coat and set it down. The quiet pressed in, unfamiliar after days of noise. She poured herself a glass of water and stood by the window again, watching the city prepare for night. Her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Ms. Brooks," a woman's voice said, measured and careful. "This is Senator Klein's office. She'd like to meet." Eleanor smiled faintly. I'm sure she would. She hung up and set the phone aside. Outside, the city lights came on one by one, like stars choosing visibility. Eleanor Brooks stood alone in the dimming room, aware that the hardest part was not the exposure, or the hearings, or the consequences still unfolding. It was what came after. Because once the truth surfaced, there was no going back to the comfort of not knowing, and Eleanor had never been comfortable anyway. The vote came down just after sunset, quietly, without ceremony, the way decisions that reshape systems often do. Eleanor was not in the room when it happened. She was walking along the river, coat open, letting the cold air cut through the last remnants of adrenaline. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. She did not stop walking. She already knew what it would say. By the time she reached the bridge, the message had spread. Oversight expanded. Funding frozen. Contracts suspended pending review. An independent task force announced with language carefully chosen to sound proactive rather than reactive. The network that had hidden behind consultancies and plausible deniability was being pulled into daylight piece by piece, not dismantled yet, but exposed enough to bleed. Eleanor leaned on the railing and watched the water move beneath her, dark and steady, carrying reflections it did not care about. Cars passed behind her. Laughter drifted from somewhere upriver. Life continued, stubborn and indifferent, exactly as it should. Her phone rang. "You did it," Agent Mercer said without preamble. "No," Eleanor replied. "They did?" A pause, then a quiet admission. "You forced the issue." "I removed the excuses," Eleanor said. Mercer exhaled. "They're asking you to consult." "Officially." Eleanor smiled faintly. "Of course they are." "And?" "And I'll say yes," she said. "On my terms." Another pause. "I figured." They hung up. Eleanor stayed on the bridge a moment longer, letting the cold settle into her bones. This was the part no one filmed. No hearings, no microphones, just the aftermath, the recalibration. When she returned home, the apartment felt smaller than it had before. Familiar. Safe. She placed her tote bag by the door and stood still, listening to the quiet. No sirens, no alerts, just the hum of the city through glass. She poured a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The folder lay open in front of her, thinner now. Names crossed out, lines redrawn, work remaining. Her phone buzzed again. A message from Rachel. They offered me my job back. I said no. I accepted a position with the task force instead. Eleanor smiled fully this time. She typed back. Good. They need people who noticed. A second message followed almost immediately. I wouldn't have done it without you. Eleanor paused, then replied, You already did. I just stood next to you when it mattered. She set the phone down. Later that night, the television played softly in the background, muted. Eleanor caught glimpses of herself on the screen, still frames from the hearing, headlines scrolling beneath. She turned it off. She did not need to watch the narrative form. She knew how these things went. Heroes simplified, villains isolated, systems forgiven if enough time passed. That was fine, because what mattered had already shifted. Weeks passed, the world adjusted, New policies announced, old faces retired early, quiet settlements reached. Not justice in the cinematic sense, but accountability in increments, the kind that lasted longer. Eleanor took the consulting role. She spoke when necessary. She declined invitations that smelled like absolution without change. She insisted on data, on audits, on sunlight. Some days were exhausting, others quietly hopeful. One afternoon, she stood again in an airport terminal. Different city, different flight. The same architecture of movement and control. She wore the same kind of coat, carried the same tote bag. This time, no one stopped her. A young security officer scanned her pass, smiled politely, waved her through. No recognition, no judgment, just procedure done correctly. Eleanor paused for a moment beyond the checkpoint and watched the flow of people. Travelers, workers, families, all of them trusting systems they never thought about until they failed. She adjusted the strap of her bag and walked on. On the plane, she took her seat by the window. The engine started. The familiar vibration settled. Eleanor closed her eyes, just briefly, feeling the machine lift, feeling gravity loosen its grip. This was why she had done it. Not for the hearings, not for the headlines, not even for the dismantling of one network, but for this quiet moment, for the idea that somewhere, at some altitude, fewer risks were being ignored because someone had refused to stay silent. As the plane climbed, Eleanor opened her eyes and looked out at the sky, endless and indifferent, and smiled. If this story moved you, take a moment to like and subscribe so more stories like this can reach the light. And leave a comment with these 3 words: truth over comfort.